טטיאנה, הסתדרת עם האודיו? עם השמה? מוזמנת לכתוב שנדע שאת הסתדרת ושאת שומעת אותנו רק. עוד דקה נתחיל. Aresh, we will start in 1, maybe 2 minutes, okay?
Yes, Erez. Yes, that's okay. We're starting. Sure.
Let's wait another 1 minute. You know, this is the Israeli culture. It's also already also Sunday, so let's wait for another 1 minute. הילה, בוקר טוב. מי שמצטרף אלינו ברגעים האחרונים, מוזמן לרשום בצ'אט. מהיכן ומהיכני תפקיד בדבר אחד שהייתם רוצים לקבל מהמפגש שלנו הבוקר. אנחנו מתחילים עוד דקה.
It's on the right way.
Okay.
Good.
So, good morning, Boker Tov. We are Boker Tov, Raresh. I say, please, Raresh, sorry for that. I will say a few words in Hebrew and then we can move to English.
Sure.
Hi, Chaim. בוקר טוב לכולם. האמת שאני קצת מתרגש. מפגש וובינר ראשון שלי, שלנו, ככה לקהל הישראלי בלבד, והפעם יש לי את ההזדמנות לארח את ררש. אני אומר מספר מילים באנגלית בעוד כמה רגעים על ררש, אבל אני אגיד ככה מבחינת טכנית, הוא ייתן קצת הנחיות איך אנחנו הולכים להתנהל בבוקר הזה. עיקר התקשורת בינינו תהיה בצ'אט, ככה שאתם מוזמנים לרשום הערות, שאלות או כל דבר אחר, תוך כדי אני אעקוב אחרי הדברים ואעדכן את ררש, שיהיו לנו מספר רגעים שנוכל ככה לתת התייחסות גם לשאלות. So Raresh, I would like to introduce you. It's a pleasure to have you in this webinar Sunday morning. Raresh is a master trainer, he's a systematic coach, and he's a motivation expert. He's part of the Ken Blanchard company's network. He is located in Romania, but most of his time is traveling around the world. We, Raresh and I, we had the opportunity to do some global project with Israeli companies such as Checkpoint, 888 and others. It was a great partnership between us, and I asked him to come and share with us, you know, the Israeli community, HR community, to share with us some of the most updated researches around motivation and the connection between motivation and engagement. So Raresh, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us, and the stage is yours, please.
Good, thank you. So good morning, everybody. It's just a few words that I know in Hebrew, but I promise I will learn more. And yeah, let's go with this topic of creating self-engaged employees. Basically, I'd like to invite you in 1.5 hours. We have a lot of things to cover about engagement and what's behind it, plus questions from you. So maybe Erez already briefed you, but I'd like to take the time now and invite you to ask any questions in the chat. There's in terms of the using this interface, there will be the slides that will run and you will see information. and from time to time the camera with me, but not all the time. Second, you have the chat where you can ask questions publicly so everybody can see this. There's also the possibility to private chat without any participant. If you will see that option of private chatting with presenters or with participants. There will be also public Q&As, and you see the second and another section is the Q&A, where we might ask a public question to everybody and invite you to answer a question there. And we might also do a polling or something like that. Basically, this is how it works, and let's kick it off. And I like to kick off with a question that sometimes I'm let's say, asking participants when I'm going in different workshops. And that question is related to motivation. So this is where we're going to start first, and then covering the topics for today. I'm going to switch this, and you will see there are 6 big topics that we have to cover. First is the business connection. So what's the business connection between engagement and performance in a way or another? And I'm going to give you some insights here. And then there will be talking about 2 types of motivation, which are connected to research, which is a scientific academic research, so it's kind of validated. Erez was telling you that I'm connected, and I'm actually studying motivation for about eight years now, and having access to the academic community. So I try to kind of get out of the urban myths about engagement, but trying to get in a practical side of it. And then we also like to share with you a practical approach that can be used in your companies or in any company to translate in practical actions what this engagement and motivation idea is. And for the sake of giving examples, we'd like to also give you an example. It's a customer case study that I get permission from the customer to share this with you. And I think it's interesting because it's over a large period of time that was happening. And then in the end, we'll have like wrapping up and conclusions. So in terms of making it practical, please feel free to ask questions. Erez will read the questions. And if there is any need for answering to that question, Erez, please jump in and even write it to the person in the chat or publicly, let me know, and then I'll answer that question for the topic. So this is the agenda. Let's get it started. And the first question for you is the following. Consider this webinar or another that you have attended and maybe you have scheduled, and think of the following questions and actually reasons why you are here. What made you join this webinar? And I will give you 6 options, and I'd like to invite you to think of those options, pick one, and write your answer in the chat about why are you here. And here are the 6 options. I'm going to read them and give you some time, and you can write them in English or in Hebrew, however you're feeling comfortable. In Hebrew, it's also a way for me to get used with your language. So I'm not really here, for example, I'm just busy with the time. This is an option, but actually my mind is somewhere else because I have tons of emails. Or maybe you're here because, okay, this is what you're paid to do. It's good to be seen, and that's another option. Or maybe you're here because you have to. I don't know, somebody sent you or gave you a link and said, okay, you have to be there because otherwise there was something happening. And also maybe some of you are here because it's aligned with some of your values. Maybe you value education because you're in the field of educating people, and maybe that's why you're here. Or maybe you see it's helping you fulfill a bigger purpose, like something that you want to achieve in the future. Or maybe it's just for fun for you. So I'd just like to invite you quickly to share your answers. What's the main reason why you are here? Because this is, in a way, I'll come back to these answers. I see already Hamutal said number 4 with a value and not help fulfill a noble purpose. Okay. Now, why is this interesting? Vahed also number 5, help you fulfill a purpose. Number 4, no one with number 1. 4 or 5, number 4. Okay. Let's see what we do with the fun, number 6, with this. Okay, so thank you. Now, this is an interesting question. I'm using in many situations when I like to invite people and challenge them a little bit to see why are they there. So meaning what's happening with their motivation and with their engagement for being in a meeting or whatever. Whoa, number 2. Chaim, number It's what I'm being paid to do. Okay, no, that's fun. Good. Now, why is this important? Well, actually, it's important because here is the thing, and I like to make this and switch forward to what's the business connection. Yeah. So what is this? What's the business connection with motivation? And I have, from this point of view, another question for you, and I'd like to invite you to think of that and see what can you answer to this question before going into this topic. And the question is that you will see that in the Q&A section publicly. I'm going to ask you this: how much money do you think a country's economy lose every year because of disengagement? What's your number? Think of any economy that you can think of and say and answer in the chat. How much money do you think an economy of a country can lose because of disengagement? Million. Well, can you refer in dollars or in any other answer? Yeah, I'm not sure if did you see the question? Yeah.
Not sure that people understand, but you have in the menu you have chat, and in the right you have the Q&A. You should push on the Q&A button.
Q&A. I'm going to ask also the question in the public chat for everybody to see. Yeah. So how much money do you think a country's economy lose every year because of disengagement? Now, what's your assessment or your thinking about that? How much do you think it takes? Okay, I see already billions. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, thank you, Noah, for your answer. Maybe if you also want to try your numbers and see how many numbers, you can think of different economies in the world. But this is interesting because what we took as a company, it's more of frustration. Okay. We started also to look at this. So what's the cost of disengagement across the globe? And I'm going to give you some answers with the billions. Yes, Hila, it's about billions. And here's on the next slide, I'm going to show you 3 assessments made by Gallup in 3 different countries. And you know Gallup because it's one of the big companies that is studying engagement across the globe. And they don't study just from the perspective of the emotions, but also from the numbers. And here are the numbers that are actually analyzed, identified by Gallup, and say actively disengaged employees actually produce in lost productivity $350 billion per year in the US economy, or as you can see, 138 billions per year in lost productivity in German economy, and is also being able to do in the UK economy $350 billion per year. So it's quite a lot of money that are being lost because disengagement. And what is interesting with this is that sometimes we talk about engagement and disengagement, but I was fortunate to work with a lot of companies. And sometimes I'm hearing executives not being able to articulate where is this coming from. I mean, what is engagement? I'm hearing some people using the word engagement, but they don't know how it appears, how it pops out, what's happening there. So the question is, how can you work on engagement and increase it if you are not sure how it appears and what's causing disengagement? And basically, this is a question that we started asking in a Blanchard company when we realized also, and this is the second piece of information I'm going to give you, that organizations are spending nearly $750 million per year in the Western world to treat the symptom. I mean, to improve engagement. But they often do this after disengagement happened. So it's a kind of a treating an illness after it happened, and treating actually the symptoms of it, not the cause of it. And this is a reality. So in some companies that I work with, this is what I noticed. They spend money on trying to increase engagement by paying people more or changing the compensation schemes, or do even team building activities with the hope of increased engagement, but the engagement is already down. So our perspective, and what we'd like to invite you now in the next minutes is to let's look at from a more practical side and see what's happening behind it. I mean, the question is the following: how do people become engaged? So what's happening there? What's the process? Yeah, how is it measured? Well, engagement is measured with different metrics. Gallup turned out to be the biggest in measuring this. But very interesting from this point of view is how can we predict when the engagement is likely to drop? So together with my colleagues, we embark in a journey, and that was 20 years ago. We have at the Ken Blanchard companies in the United States, with whom I'm also working, a research and development department, and this is very specialized. And basically, we started looking at this. If you want to move the needle on engagement, for example, we need to intervene before people are on the road to disengage, because money is being spent on employee engagement initiatives. They're trying to fix a problem after it occurred, and then thinking, okay, why it didn't occur? Where should we look at? And this is because there is one fundamental difference between engagement and motivation. And this is what I'm saying, that based on what we know so far from psychology and research, it turns out that engagement is a measure over time, while motivation is the quality of the experience of people on a day-to-day basis. So the engagement is the end result of people's experience of motivation or demotivation on what they do on a daily basis. So when we measure engagement, we measure actually an end result, and basically what we can focus on. Here is I'm trying to see like I can draw it. So where we should focus on is on motivation. That is our primary idea, and this is where I like to bring this in and introduce this idea of how can we work with motivation. Now, a question I see from Ares, and thank you, Ares, for telling me this. How can engagement through changes in VUCA time? So how do we do it? Global engagement with sites. Now, this is very interesting because, and here is what I like to talk about, is introducing the idea that there are different types of motivation, and we can observe this motivation from a practical side, not from a hypothetical side, then we can prevent it. And that is based on some tools we have. For example, in the Blanchard companies, my colleagues from the research and development with the academic community developed a way to measure indicators or predictors of performance. And obviously, we can share this a white paper, an article that is describing these indicators that could be also helping for you to look at it. But it turns out that we can predict disengagement and drop in performance if we look at some indicators of motivation, which needs to be translated in a day-to-day life. And this is different. So what I can say, taking also the question from you guys, which is how does engagement change through different times and fast and VUCA times, like it's happening now? We can say there are some regional or cultural differences, but these are minor. But there are some general needs that everybody has, and actually we as human beings are pretty much the same in terms of our needs. So from this point of view, I'm going to move to the second topic, which is about the two types of motivation. And I like to talk about these two types of motivation and invite you to actually correlate this with what you know, because I'm sure you read a lot, or maybe you operate with this. And I'm going to use a metaphor that I like and is very interesting. And this metaphor is about suboptimal and optimal motivation. Now, why this term of suboptimal or optimal is for the following simple reason. Nobody was ever able in the world until now at least, to measure the quantity of the motivation. And we're using this. You're motivated, you're demotivated, like black and white. But actually, when you are demotivated and you're accomplishing a task, you have a motivation. Otherwise, you wouldn't accomplish it. Right? Second, nobody was ever say how much is this motivated. It is like a quantity is the measure. The only thing that was that scientists were able to measure is the quality of motivation. That's why we call it quality-wise suboptimal and optimal motivation. And I'm going to explain this to you. And to introduce the term, and you see also some icons on the left-hand side with some food there. So I'm going to correlate this with the food, because I think it's an interesting metaphor. And basically, it's supporting this idea that the key to engagement is the day-to-day motivation. Now, where is this coming from? It's coming from research, from discovery of it. But I'll get a little bit later to the research about it. And I'd like to introduce you these two topics and say the following: that actually Suboptimal motivation is the junk food of motivation. Think about it exactly like the junk food. For example, why do people eat junk food? Right. So it might be because sometimes when I'm asking these questions in different workshops managers, they told me it's easy, it's cheap, it's affordable, it's appealing, it has a good taste, and I know it's not good, but I'm still eating it. So it's like, I mean, I did the same this week, so I'm guilty of the French fries this week. I confess. But the thing is that we can correlate suboptimal motivation with junk food motivation and say that we are serving junk food motivation to people. For example, when we threaten them, it's junk food motivation. You do it because you're afraid of consequences. Remember one of my 6 points in the beginning, why are you here? Or for example, when we promise people things, again, it's bribe or it's a reward correlated motivation, which is junk food. It's simple to activate. It's easy to activate. You don't have to be psychologist or master in anything to promise something to somebody or to threaten. This is very interesting. But on the other hand, it's very easy to activate a motivation that is, let's say, short term, because this is what we're talking. It's short term. Think about junk food. You eat junk food, and I'm talking about junk food, not necessarily healthy fast food. And then for a while, you have the feeling that you're full. But it's also creating, for example, addiction. So you like the taste, you like the smell, and you're attracted to it. And it's the same thing with motivation. If, for example, you have parents, you have children and your parents, then you might know that. Some parents maybe do this with their children, saying, if you behave, then you will get an ice cream. If you do your homework, then you get free time. Or please do this for me, or don't let me down. This is junk food motivation served to children. It's the same thing. It's the same thing like we are doing in the workplace. Now, this is one side of it. And if I'm looking around, it's a lot. I can see a good amount of people serving junk food motivation to their direct reports. What's the consequence? Well, the consequence is sometimes that, junk food is a quick comfort. Exactly. Thank you, Anat, for that. Yeah, it's easy, and you don't have to be, again, expert on that to activate it. Now, what there are consequences? Of course, because it's costly. If I'm promising things, I'm giving you an example. Emphasize a lot, the bonus could become a junk food motivation. So people will tend to work for the bonus, not for the work, for example, right? Or saying, watch out, do not disappoint me, because the second time you will not get that opportunity. I will make sure I will not disappoint you, which is junk food motivation for me. It will last as long as your threat is active. Now, the other side of this, or let's say, what's the bright side? If some of you are asking, okay, give more practical examples of junk food motivation actions at work. Okay, thank you, Danit. Yeah, so junk food motivation actions at work. For example, so besides conditioning people with rewards, say, if you do this, then you get that. This is junk food motivation, because the if appearing there is a condition that activates the reward. The discount is junk food motivation. For example, in a commercial side, buy 2 for the price of 1. It's junk food motivation for the buyer. Super offer, super promotion, or even better, Black Friday. Black Friday is a huge junk food motivation for consumers. So from outside the organization, it can happen also inside. Let's say, for example, that I like to meet with Erez here, and I'm saying, hey, Erez, I can meet with you only only Sunday, and only between 2 and 3, but I will be only for you. And this is kind of pressing him to choose that option, right? Rather than giving him options, say, Harris, are you comfortable at 2 or at 3 p.m. to meet? If I'm saying I can do it only then and only with me, and I will be 100% with you, it's a bit of junk food motivation. Harris might feel pressed to say yes because he wants to achieve his goal. So that's for example, what is junk food motivation. It's also, for example, and I gave this example, and I hope you'll not take it personally, but in my view, team building events sometimes tend to be junk food motivation for people, especially when companies, and I met that, do team building events to calm down people, to kind of re-engage them, and they think that 1 or 2 days of doing nice activities will compensate for a year of frustration. This is junk food motivation. Again, junk food motivation can be a manager who is threatening his people, talking aggressively, also punishing. This is junk food motivation. People defend. Now, moving to the other side of it. Now, what's the positive? What we call it a healthy motivation. Think about that. Think about food again. And yeah, I know that you Israeli are a really food-oriented culture, and you have a diversity of food. I was amazed by that, by the way, when going in Israel. So think about healthy food. Now, when you eat healthy food, which is made by you, or maybe you go and it takes some time, it's not junk food, and you prepare it well, and then you need time for it. What are the benefits? You feel it's healthy because it might be more fulfilling, more satiable. Then the second thing is that maybe because you do it, you can also enjoy it more. And on the other side, it's requiring cooking skills. You need to know the recipe. You need to take time to prepare. You cannot do it, in 5 minutes. It takes competence. Now, for example, for junk food, you don't need a lot of competence to order a burger. You just go there and order. Yeah? But here, if you want to make your own burger, or maybe you make a steak, or you want to make like a hummus, for example, or a lamb steak, then you need to know how to prepare it. Otherwise, you burn it. So in terms of motivation, we could say the same, that there is some healthy side of motivation, which is, for example, knowing how to work with people. And I'm going to give you some practical examples a little bit later. I mean, specific types of motivation, but basically healthy motivation means the principle of giving people the choice and saying, you have these choices. What's your option that you want to choose between these two choices here? Give people freedom within boundaries. For example, freedom within boundaries. Sometimes I'm being asked, hey, Raresh, but people want freedom without boundaries. Well, my answer to this question is freedom without boundaries. It's a social fantasy. You can't be free without boundaries because you live in a community, so everybody else will put boundaries on you. So from this point of view, freedom within boundaries means clear processes, clear procedures in a company, clear roles and responsibilities, clear delegation lines, clear goals, clear budgets. Whenever we have that, we feel we have freedom to play within those boundaries. Shelly, yes, external versus internal motivations. In a way, yes. So, but a healthy, optimal motivation can include some external motivation and most the internal motivations. Yes, that's another translation that you can make of it. Now, optimal motivation and healthy can be also playing, and some of the companies, I think, from where you are having a business in the IT software development industry. Now, software development industry is actually showing us a lot what's playing, because playing in a computer, in a user interface, it's actually activating a healthy motivation for a consumer, for an end user. The question is, how can we translate that for an employee? Now, how can they start liking to work in an organization? For example, like to play. And don't take it like a joke, the job, but actually take it like a challenge, or take it like a fun game, for example. So this is what we call optimal motivation. For example, when you chose in the beginning, my question about why are you here? Number 4 and number 5 and number 6, these are optimal motivations. Number 4, I'm here because one of my values is linked with learning, maybe, or another value. Number 5, which you said, I'm here because it helps me fulfill my purpose. This is an optimal motivation. Or some people say, I'm here because it's fun for me to learn in a different way. I'm not sure if anyone chose number 6. I think some of you chose number 6. Yeah. So this is the healthy motivation. Now, Before going to an interesting example and let's say in a way explaining the motivations behind it, I'd like to give you some numbers for those of you who are interested about numbers and might say, hey, but do you have any research-based correlations between these motivations? And here are the correlations. I picked a few of them for you. And turns out that based on the research, and I have two sources here. One source is Harvard Business Review. The other one is Gallup. Turns out that people that are optimally motivated, and that translates into high engagement later, so optimally motivation, high engagement, are 3 times more satisfied with their job. I'm highlighting here. It's correlated and compared to people that are not motivated, are 3 times more creative on the job, 10 times more engaged by their job. So this is huge, 10 times, just because they have an optimal motivation. 31% higher productivity. So think about that. And this is a research done in the last 10 years. It's not like 50 years ago, which actually they say that when people experience a motivation that is based on what they want to do, on their principles, values, clarity on what they want, they tend to put more energy in it. This is very interesting. So they tend to bring more energy and actually contribute more. They don't have to be motivated. So this is very interesting, because sometimes I'm hearing this, how can we motivate our people? Well, we can't, because people are already motivated, but they're not motivated in a way that you want. Right? So this is interesting. I might see a colleague of mine having a lower motivation to send me his sales reports every week, and I have to ask him to do it. And basically, he might feel in an imposition from me. Well, I might have another colleague of mine who she's really eager to do it and likes to do it and sends it to me before the deadline. So this is interesting because it's showing us how are people, pushed by this motivation. Now, what's the consequence on the organizational level? And this is very interesting. Any policy, any procedure, any action a manager does is affecting people, tens or hundreds of people, and their motivation on a day-to-day basis. So here's, for example, a company that I was about to work with, but then the GM did not wanted to work, and he said, well, Rajesh, for me, people are like resources, are like any book. I can replace this book with another book. So I really don't care if somebody is leaving, because I will get somebody else to work again here. And I don't care about what they want. I want them to deliver. Now, it's interesting. It's a way of thinking. I'm not judging his thinking here, but the consequence was that he was losing people. He had a high attrition rate, and he didn't do anything. He was just putting pressure, basically serving his managers, junk food motivation, pressure. His managers did the same with their direct reports and the same in the other reports. Now, where was the consequence? First, in the clients, because in the client-facing interactions, the sales reps were being aggressive with clients the same way their managers were aggressive with them and telling the clients, if you don't like them, you can leave. And this is what they did. They lost business. So this is what happens. It's cascading through the whole organization. This is absolutely fascinating if you look at the motivation. So motivation is not a concept. It's a reality we experience. Can we, for example, work with it and change it? Of course. Now, I'm going to move now to what's the research that supports that. If you're asking, say, okay, well, but where are you based on? I mean, seriously, Rajesh, you're claiming these things, and you may say, but what are you based on? And here's what I'm based on, and I'm sharing with you. And I'm starting first with this statement, which I'd like to make and invite you to reflect on it. And this is, the question is not if a person is motivated, the question is why. So it turns out that for years, we were asking the wrong question. And this is a question that scientists came to discover, that is not about if you're motivated. We're always motivated. Look at your children. If you have children, they are motivated from day one. They're motivated to explore the world. You get new employees. They are motivated to do things. Now, what happens is the motivation can drop. What happens? Not all motivation is equal. We don't all have to be all over the place, highly ecstatic and say, wow, this is actually motivation. So finding the why of motivation, why are you motivated for doing a thing? That's actually the big thing in terms of working with people's motivation. And actually, this is one of the techniques that I'm teaching people sometimes. Erez told you that we work together and I'm running some workshops about motivation. And yeah, one of the techniques that we're using is to ask people and teach people how to ask the deeper why question. Why are you motivated? What motivates you? What makes you do this? And it's very interesting because this question can reveal sometimes, let's say, hidden parts of what is motivation. And I'm giving you an example of how the why question is really important here. With sometimes when I'm working and I'm coaching managers, I'm also using a type of motivation conversation, so I can make sure that a person has a clear motivation on why the person starts coaching. And it happened to me once with one of the guys at work, and he said, and I'm going to just give you a 3-minute synthesis of a conversation that lasted for about 15 minutes, asking him. He said, Rajesh, I'm trying to shave some weight because I'm overweight and I'm trying to get to the gym. And but on the other hand, I'm not going. So I paid 1-year subscription in advance to go to the gym. I'm frustrated because I pay the money. I'm frustrated because I don't go to the gym. But on the other hand, I'm not stopping. So there is a motivation there. And I like to figure out why. So we started having a conversation and say, okay, why are you doing this? Why is it important for you to lose some weight? And he said, well, because I want to look good. And I said, cool. Why is it important for you to look good? And he said, because, I don't feel good with myself, and nobody looks at me. No woman will look at me if I'm like that. And I said, why is it important for you for women to look at you? And he quickly answered, because I like to have a relationship at one moment. I don't want to be alone. I said, okay, good. And well, why is this important for you to have a relationship? And he said, well, because I'd like to have kids in the future, and I think I'm prepared. Okay, so I continue my why. This is the technique that I use. And I said, okay, so why do you want kids? And he stopped for a while. I said, what do you mean? Everybody wants kids. I said, no. Please tell me why you want kids now. Why is it important for you? And he stopped for a while, and then he said, all my childhood, because my parents divorced, I was passed from one to the other like a ping pong ball, and I felt like I was disrespected, and I would like to raise my kids with respect. And I said, okay, I understand that. So why is respect important for you? And he said, because it's one of my values and one of my principles in life. I don't know, but for me, respect is very important. Now, this made this made him stop for a while and reflect and say, and ask him, okay, so what's the reason why are you going to the gym? Because it's not apparently to lose weight. And he said, no, actually, it's because if I want to put in practice the respect value and principle that I have, and also I think this is important for me as a future parent. And then he concluded by saying, well, I think I should respect myself with going to the gym and not put so much pressure. So basically what happened to the guy, to shorten up the conversation, is we ended up at that moment. And later on, he told me, I'm not going to pressure myself to go to the gym, because that means I'm not respecting myself, and let myself do it whenever I think it's necessary. And I think 2 months later or so, I emailed him saying, okay, so Mike, how is he doing? And he said, well, you know what? When the moment I started pressuring myself, I gradually started going to the gym, because I realized that this way I care about myself. Before that, I was pressuring myself. I felt in position to do it, but I didn't know why. But now the why is clear for me, because if I'm going to the gym, it's also helping me become a better parent in the future. Now, this is a short example. Obviously, it's a private conversation with somebody about the question of why, but finding the why is much more important than trying to check boxes, in terms of the things. Now, I got a question from Nogai. I hope I spelled your name correctly. Is there a change in the why during the last few years? It turns out that at least in terms of the psychology, there are some general whys for people to do things, and you will see the correlation right away because I'll explain it in 3 minutes or so. There are also specific whys, very particular whys, which are linked to people, principles, beliefs, and goals. And we can add the layer of generations and say that the actual generation that is on a younger age, it's what is called the Y generation generally. They have a more dynamic and maybe different why than maybe we had as a generation when we were at their age. So from this point of view, I think we can see these differences in terms of the whys, especially if we look at the higher level layer of the generations and how technology is influencing this, because we were not so technologically connected 20 or 40 years ago than the young generation is now, and this definitely affects this why. And there's also, we can look at more personal whys. For example, in some countries, at least in Europe, I'm not aware in Israel, but at least in Europe, the marriage is not seen as a social convention that is important to be respected. The divorce rates are increasing, and the network families, which means former partners going together with other partners, are increasing. So it looks like a change in the society also, which is changing the why. And then this is interesting because it's putting pressure on an organization that is built on the traditional type of system, which is, for example, the technocratic and structured organization. Good. Now I'm moving forward with the research, and for those of you who are curious, here are the numbers and here are the data of what's behind it, and why am I saying it's based in science. So the scientific approach that is informing the model that I'm going to show you in the next slide is based on the self-determination theory, which is one of the most influential theories of the 21st centuries. And this theory has been actually developed, co-created in over years and years. Now it's 49 years. It was first published in 1971. And Professors DC and Ryan, the gentleman that you can see in the picture, and I'm fortunate to be able to also work with them and learn from them directly, came with this idea after researching a lot and asking the question, why do we want to thrive in life? I mean, what's the, in a way, the why? And it turns out that, yeah, all the human beings want to feel fulfilled or feel that they're satisfied in a way or another. And basically, starting through the research, because they're very critical and cautious with the idea, they gathered thousands of psychologists across the globe. And you see countries that only last year were presenting research, including Israel. You have University of Beersheba researchers that are part of the self-determination theory. And they are researching and showing that, hello, we were asking the wrong question for years, and we were not looking where we should in terms of creating engagement, because engagement is created by the motivation, which is created by some predeterminants. This is the framework. I mean, I'm attending every 3 years this forum, and I'm feeding myself with a lot of practical data and correlations from the business side, and I'm also trying to translate this into the practical day-to-day life, because if some of you might know that the scientific world is scientific, so they're not necessarily interested in creating tools, but just to create explanations about why are we in a way or another. So the model that I'm going to show you now is based on this research and has been created by my colleagues in the Ken Blanchard companies in the last 20 years, being validated with professors Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, the two authors of this self-determination theory. And it turns out that we experience 6 motivational possibilities. That's and actually it happens to us to feel all these 6 motivational possibilities all the time. Some of them are more prominent than others. Now, if you look at the model, what you can see is that there are some bubbles. So they are being drawn like bubbles. There are some bigger bubbles and fainter bubbles. And basically, this is because we experience every second all types of motivations, some of them more powerful than others. And at times, for the same task, the motivation can change from one to another. So actually, one discovery was that in our brain is a huge dynamic of changing non-stop the motivations we have. Now, if we have some stronger motivations that are being activated from outside or from inside, like Shelley was saying, external, internal, this can last longer. The second conclusion is that optimal motivations, and you see here on the drawing, I'm going to draw here. So above this line is what we call optimal motivation, and below is suboptimal. And I'm going to quickly describe this, not converted into a workshop, because sometimes I'm doing a 2-day workshop only with this model to practice, is the following, that we experience those motivations that I call the junk food. So the lower side is junk food of motivation. For example, disinterested motivation, when I'm careless. For example, it's the minimum energy I'm putting there. I'm giving you an example. I'm reading an email in diagonal, so I'm just barely getting 2 or 3 words, and then I'm clicking on them on thread, skipping some parts because I think it's too long. And this is disinterested motivation for me. And then somebody comes to me, hey, Rajesh, did you read my email? Yeah. Do you remember what I said? This is disinterested motivation. Disinterested motivation is when I'm saying I forgot to give you a reply or the presentation in time. Disinterested motivation is delaying, postponing things because I don't have enough energy to do it. So that can happen in the organization with different initiatives. Think about that. Processes, you launch it and it's not happening. This is the lowest motivation possible. The second one, we call it external motivation, is actually the reward motivation, the orange one. So this motivation, this one here is the external motivation, meaning based on rewards, promising things, material things, emotional things. Do it for me. If you do this, you get that. This is a unique opportunity for you. This is an exclusive opportunity for you. This is external motivation. It lasts as long as it's the reward lasts. Now, the more we go to the middle of the model and we move to impose motivation, you see impose is almost in the middle, and looks to be, if we look at both axes, a bit more powerful. What is imposed motivation? As the name says, is when we do things because we have to, because there is a pressure from outside, because it's a threat, because we're afraid to lose something, money, status, comfort, clarity, a relationship. So even threatening people with relationship is actually activating an imposed motivation. So it's much more powerful. Threatening is much more powerful than rewarding. And some people don't even realize that sometimes they self-impose, meaning, I'm giving you an example. Erez is asking me, hey, Raj, can you help me with a presentation of what we discussed? When can you send it to me? And I'm asking him, when do you need it? And he says, maybe till the end of this week. And I'm saying, what about tomorrow? And that's self-imposing on me to do it beyond what I'm being asked. And he says, no, that's okay. Don't worry. No, I'm going to give it to you. That's self-imposed motivation. Some people don't realize and do it. I've seen during these different conversations, a lot of people realizing they impose on themselves a lot without being asked to, and then being in pain to deliver or suffering to deliver it. So these are the 3 junk food motivations. So the next level is to explain you this: disinterested, external, imposed. We're going to give you, we can share with you an explanation of these 3, so you can keep it with you, and you will see also we have a white paper on that we can share. And then we move to the upper part of it, which is the upper side, which you see it's aligned, integrated, and inherent. And I'm going to quickly cover them to explain you those motivations. So basically, aligned motivation is the one that I'm highlighting here is about the value-based motivation. It's something that you think it's right. It's the right thing to do. It's a principle. You understand why. So basically, the aligned motivation is the first one answering the why question. Why am I doing this? Because it's right. Because it's part of my job. Because it's part of the company process. Because it's the right thing to do. Because this way I'm helping my colleagues and I like to do that. It's one of my beliefs. Because I like to do quality work and this has helped me do quality work, and on and on. So aligned motivation is value-based. It's not enthusiastic. It's not with emotions. It's rational motivation, which is also part of our motivations that we experience. The next one is the integrated motivation, which we call integrated, meaning it's part of us, who we are. Now think about that. If some of you, or maybe most of you, are parents, then your motivation, whoops, I think the slides went off. So if you're parents, then your motivation to be a parent is an integrated motivation. This is the thing. It's integrated motivation. So that means you feel it's part of yourself. So you define yourself. I'm a manager. I'm a leader. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a consultant. I'm a parent. I'm a vegetarian. I'm an Israeli. It's integrated motivation. You don't have to think about it. It's 24/7. So this is an integrated motivation that you have. Now here is a question: how many parts of the job of people are integrated motivation? So this is very interesting. And then the last one that I'm going to cover is what is inherent, and this is the last one. And then I'm going to ask you a quick question here with it. So now I'm here with the inherent. Now, what's inherent? Inherent is play. It's game. It's a gamification. Inherent means I truly enjoy it, and some people like to maybe read, maybe run, maybe talk to others, maybe draw, maybe they like to solve complicated issues. This is fascinating for them. And you lose the perception of time, and you lose the connection with the environment because you're so absorbed and you really enjoy it and like it. And those of you who are working in a software industry and you create user interfaces, this is what you're doing. You're activating an inherent motivation. Now, one final conclusion, and one final question, I'm sorry, here, I'd like to ask you and invite you to answer in the chat is the following. What is your motivation for fulfilling the role you have in your company? It could be one or it could be more motivation. So I'd like to ask you, invite you to answer to this. Based on this, how many motivations do you have to fulfill your role, whether you're an HR manager or an HR director, or maybe you're a CEO or a consultant? Please write in the chat and think about that. What's my highest motivation for fulfilling my role out of the 6 there? For me, for example, to be a coach and be a trainer is the integrated motivation, and it's combining sometimes with the inherent because it's playing, and it's also on the other hand sometimes it's aligned because it's connected with some of my values. I mean, one of my biggest value is education. So I'd like to invite you to do this. What is your motivation to fulfill your role? And here's a question I'm asking you, and I'd like to invite you to answer to this question and think about that now. Say, okay, what's my motivation to do it? Okay, so why not integrated motivation and inherent? Okay, thank you. We already have one, good. Okay, I see integrated and aligned. Thank you, aligned and inherent, Ravit. Yes, so you like it. It's inside. It's like a game or it's play. Inherent, aligned. No one with imposed. No external motivation. Aligned most of the time, but also inherent. Thank you, Noah. Yeah. Now, I'm talking a little bit to give you some time to answer to that. Thank you, Osnat. Inherent and aligned. Let's see, Lilach, inherent and aligned. Yeah. So some people, sometimes when I'm asking this question to some managers that I'm working from different countries, I got sometimes the answer, well, my role is not to inherent. Or yes, I feel sometimes imposed and on doing my or accomplishing the job. Or even I had somebody telling me, well, it's external with most of the tasks because I'm getting, rewards for it. And yeah, here we can also, some people say, because I'm being paid to do it, I correlated with external and maybe with impose. If I'm not doing it, I'm not getting paid. So can you imagine, for example, how those people feel when they accomplish the jobs? And this is seen in the engagement, because the engagement numbers are just correlating with motivation. And yeah, so from this point of view, it gets to a lower engagement numbers. So what I can say here as a correlation is junk food motivation, the one that I'm right now going to highlight with blue. So the slower side of it definitely correlates with low engagement. And obviously, optimal motivation correlates with high engagement in the measurements. So what I can say here from science that I learned is, if you if you make sure that you people or help your people experience more optimal than suboptimal motivation, you can increase your engagement numbers. The question from Anat, how do we pull the managers from imposed to aligned and further up wider? That's a very interesting question, Anat. Thank you for that. And here's the thing: how do we pull them? Actually, if you look on the sides, the two axes of the model are actually telling you what you have to do. So the horizontal axis and the horizontal axis, which is its psychological needs, is basically telling us the more we make sure the people's psychological needs are satisfied, the more they will experience a higher motivation. Second, the more people can self-regulation, meaning the capacity to manage, to mindfully manage their emotions and thoughts and feelings, so they get more energy over time, the more they will feel an optimal motivation. And I'm not going to describe here the two axes. You will get information on that. I just want to tell you that psychological needs can be supported or frustrated by the direct manager, the way the manager communicates, or by the company, meaning the systems and processes. Sometimes performance management is undermining the psychological needs. Sometimes the goals are undermining the psychological needs. Sometimes, for example, a company policy can undermine or support it. The second thing is self-regulation. It's totally a person's job. It's not from outside. So it's my job and my capacity to regulate myself, meaning to regulate my emotions and to actually train myself to be more in balance and control. Now, to answer your question or not, how do we pull the manager from impose? We don't pull them, but we actually help them pull themselves. So it's a two-way work. You could say, if your role is to be, for example, supporting the people's development, maybe your focus is on the psychological needs. So how can you create an environment where people feel their needs are fulfilled and accomplishing the goals? And then giving the people the opportunity to train themselves in self-regulation. We are not trained in self-regulation. We're not. We have to push ourselves a lot to do this. Think about that. How can you self-regulate? For example, maybe you can do meditation. Maybe you can do sports. Maybe you can read. Maybe you can practice breathing. You can practice a mental game to focus yourself on what you're doing. But self-regulation is also being clear on your goals and values. For example, do you have a purpose, in a professional purpose, clear for you? Like, what do you want to do in 10 years? Are you clear on that? And then stick with it. This is self-regulation. Self-regulation is also asking you the question, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Is it right? Is it serving everybody? Is it according to my values? Yes or no? So mostly, and I will give you some examples here, but mostly self-regulation means being mindful and practicing mindfulness, living aligned with values, so knowing exactly what are your values and sticking with the values, and third, having a clear purpose and following the purpose. I could not find anything else that can help people self-regulate. Anything else, it's outside, it's not inside, it's not from us. So this is what this model is telling us and how we can use it. Now, practically, it takes some hours to exercise some of the things in order to be capable of doing it. And I'm sorry. And now I'm going to move forward also with, let's say, a practical approach and actually giving you some highlights about the tool that we're using. And Erez was mentioning, and I'm going to mention here. So my colleagues in Blanchard were able to create a model and a practical, let's say, process for using this motivation thing. And here is the first one. Is we believe that motivation is a skill. That means it can be trained. It can be learned. It's not something that is happening in the cloud somewhere and then, whoa, I got motivated. So from this point of view, there are two ways to work with this. On a strategic level, and I work with some companies on that, is exactly what it says here, adjusting the performance management and KPIs to support optimal motivation. So that means it's consulting work, it's organizational coaching, it's working with the executive team or working with the key leaders in the organization and saying, guys, what do we need to change on a system level? So as a consequence, people experience an optimal motivation. The second is operational, which means teaching leaders and individual contributors the key skills of motivation, the conversation, day-to-day conversational motivations. And this is also coaching on motivation conversations. So basically, we can use this on a practical level, operationally or strategically, or both, which would be the biggest impact. So we can help people thrive and move forward. And there are a lot of examples. So for example, a process that we developed in the Blanchard companies, and actually I'm teaching other people, and it's part of the workshop that we call optimal motivation. We actually took this name of optimal motivation, is to teach people that whenever you want to have a conversation about somebody's motivation, or you want to shift your own motivation, there are 3 steps that you can do. Identify your current motivational outlook, meaning your current motivation, then shift your motivation or maintain it, using a technique or several techniques that are part of the workshop, and then reflect on how you feel and whether anything changed or not. And basically, this is a process that could be repeated again and again. So it's a process that, goes back and forth. It's like a circularity. So every time, for example, I'm having a task and I realize I'm lagging and I hate the task, I go and I'm saying, okay, what's my motivation here? Why am I motivated to do it? Is it imposed? Is it external? Is it a pressure? Or is it aligned? Second, using the why question and other techniques and asking myself, how can I do this differently? During the workshops that I did with people, so in the last 6 years, I work with thousands of managers with workshops testing this idea. So I'm telling you from the field, from practical side, I could see people shifting their motivation from 1 or 2 hours to even the fastest was 15 minutes, from a task a person hated to at least understand the why. It was their work. It's not my work or somebody else. Their work of shifting the motivation without tricking themselves. So it is possible. I witnessed that. And then go to reflecting. So this process, we can teach managers the process, and we can teach individuals to do it, and they can do it on themselves. It's a tool. It's a tool that they can use. Now, the second thing that is important is we can teach leaders that optimal motivation means to develop a skill to shift people and move them from suboptimal to optimal on a daily basis, meaning asking themselves every day, every second, am I creating an optimal motivation or a suboptimal motivation across my people by what I'm doing right now? What's actually my behavior? And it's like even going to this question and this statement that I'm making now, I think a leader cannot motivate anyone, but a leader can shape a workplace where people are more likely to experience an optimal motivation outlook. So this is something that can be worked out. And for example, in terms of a conversation, when we talk about activating an optimal motivation with others, like in a leader role, here is what can happen is, okay, learn the skills of activating the optimal motivation. Then people go in a workshop and practice the 3 skills on a meaningful task and goal, and then create action plans. So basically what we see is, without practice, it's just a nice conversation about it. So we encourage people to do it. I mean, train themselves on doing this with practical things. Now, here is a synthesis of the 6 key words that I like to conclude with this the practical tool before moving to the client case study. We also have a client case study here, and this is what doesn't work. You can see on the left hand side what doesn't work, and the best practices, what does work with people. And here the big letters that you see, ARC MVP, are actually describing the 6 big concepts. That is, encourage autonomy, deepen autonomy, relatedness, and competence are the 3 basic psychological needs that everybody has on Earth, based on research in the last 40 years. Mindfulness, values, and purpose are the 3 skills or practices that we can use to self-motivate or motivate others. And this is a kind of a synthesis that we can be also used in the organization. Think about that. You want to make sure that processes are aligned in your organization. This could be a checklist. Are we encouraging autonomy within limits in our organization? Are we deepening relatedness? Are people connected with the task or the goal, or with themselves? Are we developing competence with the task, or if the task is meaningless? Are we promoting mindfulness? Do people have time to really ask the why question before doing it? Are we aligned with values, organizational values, and personal values with the task? Are we connected with the purpose? Is the purpose clear for the team or for the individuals? Yeah, of course. Now I'm talking and I'm giving you a brief explanation of what's happening in 1 or 2 days in a workshop, or even more. But basically, I wanted to give you a glimpse of it, and also invite you to look at this and see what are these important. Why? Because here is the thing, and again, it's science that we have research done in the past 10 years in our Blanchard company, that there is a high correlation between optimal motivation and those 5 intentions that are the best predictors of performance. So those 5 intentions end up to be the most important key indicators in predicting performance. What is it? Use discretionary effort, or perform at a higher level. You never do that if you don't feel optimally motivated. That's the correlation from practical, from going into companies, endorsing your company or staying in the company. You never do that if you're not optimally motivated. Be an organizational citizen, respect the company and the procedures. You never do that if you're not optimal. You see, it's when you're disinterested, is negative correlations. You do the opposite. And when you're suboptimally motivated, there is no correlation. It's not influencing at all, higher, increasing or decreasing. So if you want your people to use discretionary effort, for example, or perform at a higher level, the best thing to do is help them experience optimal motivation in ways that I described before. That's the case for it. And this is the business case. For those of you who are interested in this business case, we can share a public white paper with you, and we'll send it to you later about that, so you can see also the data there if you're really interested. But now I'd like to move to the client case study. We have about 23 minutes left, and I'd like to cover the client case study here, and also invite you other questions that you have, if maybe even about the client case study. So please throw in your questions. Now, the client case study is about Vodafone, working with Vodafone. Now, I work with Vodafone personally for 18 years, and I've been involved in different projects. And one of the projects that I have been involved is helping them develop an empowerment culture and work with them in creating engagement in their company. It was one of the key issues they had. And there was a 2-stage interventions that I'd like to share with you and share some results that we have, because also it's the practical side of it. And Yeah, thank you, Erez. I can read Q&A, so I assume it's about Q&A, but that's okay. So here is it. Basically, stage one, which happened during 2012, 2014, was focused on developing the leadership skills of the management, 450 leaders of an organization, of an organization, N-1 to N-4. That means N being the CEO, so below the CEO, 4 levels of the organization. And actually, they had an initiative that they called the Empowerment Store, which meant, in a way, exactly what I was telling you. Let's take processes and see which processes are actually affecting empowerment and creating subordination, and which processes could be shifted so they can create more empowerment. And this was to support a trust-based culture. Now, there was huge discussions and a design about this project and how can this be done, and it took 3 years to do it. And basically, and on the next slide, I'm going to show you the framework that they developed, which was, and you see here on the left-hand side, the bands, which is, maybe some of you are familiar with this, E band, F band, managers in the company. And then they designed kind of a pyramid process with different interventions, like role of the leader, role of the manager, role of the customer-facing manager, and starting management. And we were involved in some of these, not in all of this design, with specific interventions that are linked with Blanchard products, meaning with leadership and motivation. I'm going to show you this. So basically what they wanted was they wanted to correlate these teachings and going from down to top, and also have common messages for the leaders and for the customer-facing leaders, and also for the new managers here. And for doing this, we were a few providers. One of the providers were us, and we worked together with them. And basically, our intervention was on this level, specifically for the management and customer-facing. And on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see 4 of the programs that we used to create the custom intervention. And maybe some of you know situational leadership experience, the workshop Situational Leadership 2 experience, which is a workshop that we're delivering to teach leaders how to be situational and adapt according to the situation. The second one is self-leadership. This is the complementary workshop. Actually, it's self-leadership. It's supporting an individual contributor to talk to his direct manager and have the same language, the same situational language. Then the third one was optimal motivation, the workshop that I was briefly presenting its structure before. And the last one was team leadership. So how to work in teams and develop a team mindset. So as you can see, the same icons here, like circle, rectangle, triangle, and star, you can see them highlighted in different levels. So for the G band, managing self and others, we had situational leadership and also the self-leadership teaching. Then for the upper level, we also included motivation and team leadership. And we did this over time, for three years, with a lot of managers, and teaching them the skills and following up. Now, for those of you who are curious about results, so what are the results that we have? Here is the results that we get, and we have some are numbers, some are not numbers, because I did not permission to get those numbers. So basically, the results were the following: for the trust, which was important for them, one of the key values, 2010, 2012. 19 points up from 61, which is 80. So 19 percentage points. Yeah. Then for engagement index, measured internally, from 68 plus 10, 78. Now for the employee net promoter score, some of you might know the NPS, net promoter score, from 48 plus 23, which is 71. This is pretty important as an increase in those years. Take into account, please, that in those years, post-crisis, it was 2009 crisis, 2011, 10, 2011, 12, the market was not doing so well. The market was actually going a little bit down, and they were getting these numbers up. They had plus 300,000 customers year on year, April, June, as you see, quarter one, which was, I got this measurement, Service revenue was a good trend. They did not allow me to show you numbers. Data revenue, which is internet selling service, plus 26. Net promoter score from customers was positive trend. So these are numbers measured in their company based on training leaders the skills. So without doing a refresh of the whole organization, training the skills and supporting the initiative of streamlining processes and procedures. And yeah, from my point of view, I think it's good at least knowing the company. Now, here's the thing. We started stage 2. And last year we started stage 2 with the same company, working on the next level of it. So after training the skills for people, we had the following. Why is now trust? It's a key direction in the company, so it keeps being there. But they also want to focus on creating self-engagement and building a delegative culture. We work with the executive team in 2019, and top 64 leaders in January 2020. I mean, just finished the workshop, the last workshop 2 days ago. Yeah. And then it's going to be continued at lower levels this year. What did we do? This time was different. It was organizational coaching. Now, what do I mean by organizational coaching is working with a big number of people. You see the picture of all the participants in the last workshop there. It's working to change dramatically through a lot of people, systems, and mentalities in the organization. And doing this by doing a diagnosis and help people own the diagnosis and realize where they are, and then use and teach them and practice delegative processes. How can they delegate more? And this is not role play. This is real life from their company. And do systemic coaching, which is something that I'm doing, is one of my specialties. So we're a team of coaches, obviously, for that. So what's the goal of this? Is to support the development we started years ago, this time changing mental patterns of leaders, that they will start changing it on the lower levels in the organizations. So what are they left with was tens of new decisions, completely revamping the meeting system in the company, a process of reviewing the performance management to activate more engagement in a company and more empowerment. This is just what I saw in 3 days, plus listening to themselves more and being more delegating by themselves. It's coaching. So for those of you who are familiar with coaching, you might already have an idea that this is about changing the mental patterns with people in days. So, and that they will have an impact on the company later on. So this was the work that we did in 2 phases with the company. If you have any questions about the work and the client that we did here, and if I can answer those questions, please throw in those questions. Don't be shy, and I'll answer to the best of my knowledge. You can also leave the questions for later if you still have, and then we can answer. But this is basically for me to see the difference in those years in terms of how can we work in a company. So actually we touched both. So first stage 2012, 2014 with Vodafone was teaching the skills, and the second stage here is what I was telling you in the beginning. Is more strategic, is more consulting. Now, one thing is, now if you ask me if I would start from scratch, I would start with this approach first and then with the other one. But obviously it depends on the client and the reality. For them, it was much more comfortable to start first with teaching managers a lot of skills. There was a lot of managers there, and then going up here. Yeah, I don't know what you're saying, Yoris, but I hope it's good because I see a smiley face there.
I encourage them to ask questions, but that's what I wrote in Hebrew.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then we're preparing to kind of wrap up. We still have about 13 minutes left or so, and I'd like to invite you to ask questions if you have. I'm gonna show you again the list in the beginning, meaning all the topics that have been covered so far. And to wrap up those topics, we looked at the business connection with engagement and why a lot of money are being poured into correcting something that happened already. And then look at the 2 types of motivation that I was highlighting to you, which is junk food motivation and healthy motivation, or in other words, suboptimal and optimal. And then there's a model that is behind it and the research, the 6 motivations that we can teach people. And obviously there are books. So you can read books if you like. And there's also, we're fortunate enough, Erez and me, to have access to practical tools for it, meaning working with some practical tools from our partners Blanchard in the US. And yeah, there's also the customer case study that I share with you. So what I'd like to do now is maybe invite you to throw in some questions if you have, or curiosities about the tool or the implementation. Erez, if you feel the need to add something about either the program or maybe.
No, first of all, I want to thank you for the time and for sharing with us your knowledge about motivation, including the business case with Vodafone. So it was really valuable for us. And as we promised, we will send in the next 1 or 2 days. We will send a link recording the recording of this webinar, and including the white paper of the business case for motivation, as Ravesh promised you. And if you have any questions, that's the time asking questions. We can do it now. We can do it offline, of course. So that's the time. Ravesh, would you like to say a few words before you ending that? Here's coming question from Lilach.
Yeah, I see, Lilach, yeah. So can you recommend a specific books regarding motivation and engagement? Yes, I can. So if you want, and Erez, maybe you can write the names of the books. I don't know if you have it in Hebrew translated. Susan Fowler's book, Why Motivating People Doesn't Work and What Does. So one author that I'm writing now, Susan Fowler, that you can take her book. She has 2 books about it. Susan is our colleague from the Blanchard company and did a lot of research about it. So Susan has 2 books, Why Motivating People Doesn't Work and What Does. That's funny title. The second, Master Your Motivation. This is very much for individual contributors. Now, I'm writing also the names of the researchers, Professors Richard Ryan and Edward Deci. These are the 2 fathers of the theory and actually one of the most highly influential experts in the world in motivation. And any book from them, it could be interesting to actually read. Well, they have, for those of you who like, I don't know, the scientific approach, they have the Handbook of Self-Determination Theory, which is that thick. So it's pretty heavy, but you might read it. Yeah, and white papers and articles we will send to you later, guys, because we have from our colleagues in the US those writing articles. Now, what I can tell you, for those of you who want to read more about self-determination theory, if you're like on the scientific part, there is a lot of it. Would like to share with you practical articles with research in business, so it can help you with what you do. More information on the best practices. Yeah. So Havid, actually, for best practices, one source is one of the books and articles. The second thing is, when you mean best practices, you mean client best practices? Is it like what I share with you with Vodafone, or is it a best practice in terms like a manager or like an individual? That would be interesting to learn, so I can answer it to that. Yeah, and yeah, obviously you can also, if you like videos and it's quicker for you, you can also go on YouTube on the Blanchard channel, and you can see that there are some videos on that that are covering this topic. And then a second, let's say, approach, but it's aligned, is Simon Sinek's approach. So Simon Sinek, who is last year, Simon had a very interesting and nice webinar together with Ken Blanchard, the founder of Ken Blanchard Companies. I'm writing his name here, Simon Sinek. He's also doing research and sharing about motivation, and basically his books around why are very interesting and are actually touching the same thing. I mean, okay, so Javid says best practices you mentioned, autonomy, for example, more explanation on that. Yeah. So Javid, for that, the best source now is either get a quick glance on an article that we're going to share with you, or get Susan's book on motivation, any of them, and you'll get plenty of explanations for that. If you think it's more important for you to have a conversation, then I think we can do it. We can have a conversation with Erez or with me. We can set up one-on-one if you like. And I think Erez can give you more details if it's something practical from my experience, for example. I mean, I'm doing this on the workshops. So books are giving you details. The most practical are workshops. And then if it's a need of a conversation, let's see how it, and Erez, you can maybe mediate or maybe give more details on that. Definitely on autonomy, how to increase it, and other needs like relatedness and competence.
Okay, we will send a few articles, PDFs that you can learn from it and get more information about the model and how the application of the model, and as Raresh said, the business case for motivation. Mm-hmm. And other questions that you have, feel comfortable, contact me and my team here in Israel. We are more than pleasure to answer.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's it. So it's also interesting, for example, because when you will look at the recording, you can also maybe review some of my examples. And if you have any specific questions, I think it's great to go back to Erez. It's the simplest way, and say, hey, Erez, I'd like to get more from this point of view, or can you give more examples, or can we have a conversation together with Raresh on that? And if it's needed, we can set this up until I'm coming in Israel, because I will be visiting Israel this year, so that's another thing. But yeah, go to Erez first. Good. So what else? A few minutes left, like 5 minutes left, and
I think we plan something for for ending the session. So I think we can go ahead, Raresh.
Yeah, we go ahead with the poll. Okay, so the first, I'd like to share this this poll. I'm not sure if you can see it. Okay, Q. Good. So we'd like to ask. Okay, thank you so much. Poll. Okay, we're gonna activate this poll for you, which is. Okay. Okay, so I'd like to ask you this about what's your answer on this poll about finding relevant information because we'd like to invite you also to take the chance and okay, thank you Adva. Yeah, you had fun. Thanks, that's good. Thank you, Shirley. So I'd like to invite you also to give us your first reaction on this webinar. Something that I'd like to share with you is for Erez and me, it's the first time that we do this webinar. So it's also an interesting experience for us. So I'd like to first of all thank you also for your patience for doing this, because it's an experiment. And any of your feedback would be also helpful, and I appreciate it in terms also of how can we improve this webinar, except for the content, the way it was interacting. So first, thank you also for that. Toda haba. I also prepared a slide, which Erez told me it's the right thing. So it's the first time that I'm writing in Hebrew. So I'd like to thank you very much for your presence here and appreciate your time. And let's stay in touch. Erez is your main contact there, and yeah.
Yeah, and thank you, Raresh. Thank you for the time. I know it's a Sunday for you, and looking forward meeting you face to face very soon. And most of you knows the Blanchard model, the development level. So as Raresh said, this is our first time that we are doing it together. And at the beginning, we were very, in D1 level. And we found ourselves during the preparation D2, but now we feel D3, and we would like to learn from you, and any feedback that you have would be very valuable for us for future events like this. So thank you for that. Have a good week. Thank you, Raresh.
Thank you.
And for any question that you have. Thank you all.
Good. Thank you. Bye.